everybody. It's good to be back for another episode of My Normal. I'm very excited and glad to be back in front of this microphone. It's been some time and I'm looking forward to kicking this little podcast into gear and bringing you some exciting conversations. A couple little changes to the format include only doing face-to-face conversations because Zoom can go and eat a bat. Plus, I'm also doing a bunch more with video production in future episodes, and we're going to get fancy. Today's guest, I'm very happy to share a conversation with Joel Ma, aka Joelistics. Over the past few months, Australian hip-hop royalty Joelistics has been trickling out his first tastes of ambitious new production record, Joelistics Presents Film School. Upon my first listen, I am very into this for many reasons. This record takes you on a global journey of sounds and samples that's brilliantly collaborated with some of the finest musicians. His album is being launched this Saturday, the 6th of March at Howler in Melbourne, and it's sure to be a blast. I want to thank Joelistics for allowing me to use this track, which is Yokai, off the opening track actually, off the new album Film School. I did mention before that I'm looking at kicking this podcast into gear, but I do need your help. If you could head over to my YouTube page, if you type in My Normal Podcast and hit that subscribe button. I need to get my subscribers up so I can get myself one of those fancy custom URLs so I don't have to type in 1 million letters to make people find me. Let's get into it. Joel Ma, aka Joelistics, welcome to My Normal. How are you, mate?
I'm very good. How are you, Aiden?
Very good, man. We are here at the lovely Box Hill Institute.
Yes.
Pretty sweet, pretty nice digs.
Yeah.
Both of us are, occasional employee here and getting through to these kids. But I wanted to talk to you today about where it all starts for you. So can you tell the audience what it is that's sort of shaped your DNA as a musician?
Well, I grew up in a very music-friendly household. Two households. My parents split up when I was 2.
Yeah.
And my dad is an architect and my mum is a teacher. And my dad is a huge jazz and blues and folk music fan. So he had a lot of Bob Dylan records. He had a lot of records when I was growing up. I would say his collection revolved around jazz, which included like Miles Davis, Charlie Mingus, John Coltrane, even Duke Ellington and some big band stuff.
Yeah.
And Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
That was not country and western. It was jazz and Dylan.
Yeah.
And he had his thing.
Yeah.
And my mum's tastes like lent more towards Al Green and Ann Peebles and soul music, but also like the Neville Brothers and the Meters, like some really funky stuff. But
sick.
Yeah, she has really good taste. They both do, in fact. And my sister, I think my parents pegged my sister as being the musician because they gave her piano lessons and she had a piano when we were growing up. And we grew up in two households, mum and dad's household. We'd swap between them 2 weeks in each house. But it was funny because I would go in and just like even at like 5 and 7 would go in and bang on the piano and try and play it, but not play it properly because I didn't want to learn and get lessons. I wanted to just like press the sustain pedal and hit notes and let it ring out. And I think the kind of households that mum and dad sort of ran were very much like music was playing on Sunday mornings and it was playing at dinner time and it was playing when they were cooking and it was playing, it was a big part of my life's ambient sounds. Yeah. And so, I remember sitting in front of the record player at Dad's place and putting on the White Album before I was 10 and putting on and loving the song Piggies because it had the sounds of pigs in it. And then loving the sound of Rocky Raccoon because it was sort of weird and it made me feel like kind of like it was a sad story, but it was also an uplifting story, all those early formative emotions of discovering what music can be. I can really recall some of that stuff. Yeah. And then, in high school, I discovered weed and acid and suddenly Dad's record collection was this portal to everything that I wanted to be a part of. Yeah. It was, suddenly his Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, or John McLaughlin's Shakti record, or the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Yeah.
Was blowing my mind. And this is all not my taste. This is just what I had access to.
Yeah.
But also I started playing drums in high school and year 7. And my first record that I bought was Lenny Kravitz's Let Love Rule.
Yeah. What was the first piece of music you were gifted?
The first piece of music I was gifted was the album's called Whispering Jack, John Farnham. You're the Voice.
Yeah.
You're the Voice. It was huge. I was born in 1977. I'm much older than I look.
Yeah.
So that John Farnham, that record hit when I was in year 5 or year 6 in primary school. And I remember my friend John Luke Mayo got it on a tape and he played it to me, and I just was like so into it.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember. I think I asked for my dad to buy it for me. Anyway, he bought it. I got it as a gift, and he actually took me to the concert as well at the entertainment center some years later.
Can you remember sort of what aesthetic to John Farnham that was attractive to you?
Yes, I can distinctly remember really loving the sound of the tape that goes do-do-do-do-do before the first song played, and being as into that sound as I was the whole record. But I also loved the epicness of that record, and listening back to it as an adult, it's full of synthesizers and and some pretty high level electroacoustic production for the 80s, which is that sort of Phil Collins era, everyone's using sort of, I don't know, DX7s and whatever, big patches that feel quite sort of epic and reverb drenched. And like, I rate that record still. Yeah. I'm not embarrassed by the fact that is such a formative record. Yeah. Because I've listened back to it and gone, the production is fucking sick.
Yeah. I feel it's super, even probably I've just had this realization now that like my first gifted album was Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's like subliminally, whatever the word is, like shapes your musical taste forever. Yeah. Like you've clearly shaped like your interest in synthesizers and all that sort of stuff, which probably birthed from that. But I mean, from that, like I've been a rock and roll guy forever. After that was Californication.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Chili Peppers. So I feel like, I mean, like I'm hopefully starting a family soon. I reckon I'm going to really overanalyze what the first piece of music that will be my spawn's like.
What's the formative
musical possession? I think
that's really interesting. I have a daughter, Lua, and she is obsessed with dub music. I don't know what that says about what's going to happen in the future, but she I bought a box set of this an artist named Pole who does. He's German, and he does sort of like deep sub bass dub with like Juno patches and crackles for the rhythm parts, and she loves that record. Yeah. And she loves old Augustus Pablo and King Tubby and stuff. But traveling
How old
back,
is she?
She's now 9 months as of last Friday. 9 months old. So she's been out longer than she's been in by 3 days.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And already like supreme music taste.
Yeah. Oh man, she's growing up in a household full of music. Yeah. And I think it's probably it's a language that my parents passed on to me. It's a language that my partner's parents passed on to her. It's the glue, it's the language that me and my partner speak together and also it's funny, like, how much, when Tanya was pregnant and when Lua was young, like music has been something that's sort of helped us survive having a child during COVID times and helped us survive. Lua's quite a complex child. She's got some extra needs. And so we've, some of that stuff was really hard to navigate when you couldn't access family last year. And so music became this medicine for us. It really helped us to come to terms with lots of stuff. And also, sleeplessness and what the fuck are we doing and what happened to, our youth and all those questions that arise naturally. It's somehow, music's been a big part of
and I guess it's also probably a blessing through COVID and timing, having a child and getting that time to like for a man to almost have that maternal leave.
Oh, man.
Or paternal leave stuff. Like,
it was brilliant.
Actually,
it was a real blessing.
Had
in
the
disguise.
opportunity to be around it. You know, like as the typical touring musician or the working musician, like having a baby. Like, there's no paternal leave.
There's 2 weeks. So the Centrelink will pay you for 2 weeks to take time off from your job.
Yeah, right.
But that is not enough. That is not what you. I mean,
2 weeks to get him into King Tubby.
Yeah, 2 weeks, and also like, I mean, look, it is that first initial. My experience of that first bubble of when Lua came out for a month. It's like being high. Like, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
We were in this bubble of just gooey, warm love.
Yeah.
And you're getting to know, and Lua was so fragile, and so everything was so surreal because of how much you're just focusing on this new human being, and they're looking at the world like, whoa, and you're looking at them like, whoa. And yeah, it's 2 weeks is not enough time to absorb. Like, because I mean, I can still literally just spend hours just watching my daughter just discover a ball.
Yeah.
It's the best thing in the world.
Yeah, the brand new high.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, what a trip.
Yeah, it is a trip. But so for me, when for mum and dad and the whole sort of growing up with music, I give them props, but I have to really give props to my sister. So I have an older sister who's 5 years older than me, and she introduced me to, Prince and Madonna and De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest and Gil Scott-Heron and like the cool stuff, like she took mum and dad's influences as well, but she also kind of found that she loved that sort of mid-70s funk and Sly and the Family Stone and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember sort of stealing her tapes and records, and I also remember being in year 7 and other kids being like, "Oh man, do you like Metallica?" And I'd be like, "No, but I love Like a Prayer," like.
Yeah.
So I have always had a deep love of pop music.
Yeah.
And I think when my peers were all getting into sort of really heavy shit, I was getting into more and more synthy pop music from the 80s.
Yeah.
Which I still love. I still love that shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely took me a while to appreciate the pop stuff. I definitely remember it, but I guess I sort of took me getting to like my 20s and actually studying music to go back and appreciate how good like the pop stuff was in the 90s and even like the hip hop and the R&B stuff.
Enjoying the podcast? How about starting your own? My Normal Podcasts is now searching to develop new and emerging podcasts. From creating your very own jingles to sourcing hosts and guests for your corporate brand. Please visit www.mynormalpodcasts.com for more information on how to add personality to your project.
Hip hop, for me, because there was playing. I used to drums was my first instrument, and I was in school bands playing like Joe Cocker and the Beatles and Rolling Stones covers, but then also starting bands and the bands being influenced by like Faith No More and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and even heavier stuff like Dead Kennedys and quite a bit of punk stuff. But for me, the whole kind of hip hop influence felt like when it was my Nirvana or something. It was my rebellion. Like, it was my play loud and jump around and go crazy too. And, Ice Cube, The Predator is still, to me, one of the heaviest records of all time. Like, not just sonically, but just the attitude and what runs through that record and what it implied about the world being, I guess, a much more complicated, layered, nuanced and deeply in just place. It spoke to that something social that I didn't fully understand, but I kind of knew I wanted to understand. And and I still rate that as just such a heavy, awesome record.
Yeah, sick. Yeah, definitely like to get into sort of your DNA of hip hop and what sort of shaped your sound and that sort of stuff. You as a 15-year-old, what was your typical Saturday? Like, what were you getting up to in your childhood on a Saturday afternoon?
A Saturday afternoon? Saturday night?
Saturday. Like, if you had whole Saturday to just do your ideal tasks, what were you?
Oh, okay. So the ideal tasks at home would include drumming, like practicing drums. I got gifted a drum kit from one of my sister's boyfriends, Stuart. What's his name? I can't remember his second name. Lovely dude. He actually gave me lessons as well, and I would practice a lot. What else would I do? Swimming at Dawn Fraser Pool, because I grew up in Sydney. So then a really big part of my sort of 14 to pretty much like early 20s was smoking weed. I 100% used to smoke a fucking lot of weed as a kid. My mum sold weed when I was growing up, so I had access to a lot of it.
Perfect.
I used to sell it at high school. I took great pride in building bongs and going and buy. It was just when weed shops had started, but like tobacconists were starting to sell pipes.
What was your go-to DIY technique?
Well, my favourite one was a tennis ball silver container, which I would sink a pipe into. But obviously, like orchie bottles or even like a apple or carrot bong had been used in the past. But this tennis ball one, because it sort of covers your whole mouth, and it was a bit like, I don't know, it was like just quite intense, and you could really get a draw out of it. And bucket bongs, like, it was a very big. I can't. And I'm not promoting drugs or saying, I'm not saying that they're bad. This is how I grew up. This is what I engaged in. And it was, music, weed, acid. Those were the three things that I did.
Did you smoke cigarettes?
No. I started smoking when I was in my early 20s, and I gave up.
Bingo. Anyone who votes against fucking legalized marijuana.
Is that the common argument?
Probably. I don't know. I think cigarettes kill more people than marijuana do.
They definitely do. Oh man, ciggies they're little death sticks. And it's funny when we were aiming to get pregnant or conceive, my partner and I went to see a Chinese doctor, and the Chinese doctor said, the first thing you should do is stop smoking cigarettes. That is the worst thing you can do for, to get healthy baby making juices flowing. I don't really miss cigarettes. I think ciggies were just a big part of, the music lifestyle. I think there's when you're on tour. When I was touring a lot with TZU, I think ciggies were just something to do while you waited for the next thing to happen.
Something to do with your hands, something to make yourself look busy.
100%. But not so much. And I don't smoke weed anymore, by the way. I'm not, I'm not like, fuck it, weed, man. It's more like that was my teen years, and I did it so much. And it is intricately linked with my music tastes and my, with lots of ideas of art and whatnot. But that, I can't do that stuff now. That stuff is back then. But my ideal Saturday was probably getting stoned and putting on records and, practicing drums.
Was it becoming a family man as the main reason or reason code as to stop smoking weed?
That's definitely a big part of it. But also I found my weed hangovers were just as bad as my drinking hangovers, and I don't have much free time anymore. And so the time that I do have that's free, I want to use to make really good music or have really good present conversations with friends and be around, there somewhere, wherever that is. And just weed just is a bit more like when you have more time on your hands. I don't have the time at the moment.
Well, I feel like if you get high enough, you can almost like engage or exercise that part in your brain. Especially when songwriting.
And same with acid. I think I think you don't need to do it to tap it to get on that vibe and remind yourself of what it is and go to that place. Whatever it was that you liked or found really expansive about those things, you can find that and unlock it.
Absolutely. Just at least unlock that part of your brain where you just go, I am just a minuscule piece of DNA on this global scale. It's handy.
It's to look at yourself with the perspective of your insignificance, but the utter significance of that insignificance, and then kind of expand that out and go, oh, cool. you know, the experience is everything, and I want to treasure this.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, I really do think that those feelings come when you're a teenager and when you do mix it, you know, a responsible amount of psychedelics and good music. I think some doors do unlock, and you do start to kind of open up, and that was a hugely iconic and very important part of my musical growth. And I think, you know, it informed a lot of the connections that I made in my early 20s that sort of led to bands and led to scenes and whatnot. Because I think, you know, it's really that you can't, I really, even with the students at Box Hill when we talk, and I kind of can't impress upon them enough how different it was trying to access music and what music meant for 100%. Your friendships when you were before the internet, before you had access to everything. You had to find ways to find the music you liked, and what music you liked defined who you were to everyone else, you know, socially, fashion, you know, what subculture you decided to kind of,
what logo you'd drawn on your school bag.
100%. And also those lyrics that you were listening to was the armor you wore out at your high school, like who you were. And I think that there's a real diffusion of that with the ability to, you know, I think my little brother once he's like, do you like Brazilian psych music? You know, he's like talking about some stuff from the 70s, some really cool shit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, man. You know, and I think I named, what's that? I can't think of the name of the band. Os Mutantes.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I really like Os Mutantes. He's like, yeah, there's more than that. He's like, I downloaded all of it. And I went, what do you mean? He's like, I went on a thread and I got like 15 gig of psychedelic Brazilian music. It covers everything from from 1960 up to today. And I'm like, that's
my schedule.
Mind blowing. Yeah. That you just got, you know, like I remember going to record stores or CD shops and having to like sit through a fucking conversation with the dude behind the counter who's telling me about, you know, the connection between Mr. Bungle and Faith No More and why I should listen to Mr. Bungle, and me going, okay, I guess I'll buy the CD, and then going home and it being awesome, or vice versa, getting, you know, Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart and taking it home and being told it's the best thing ever and going, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You know, you had to do your research and commit to some things.
Yeah. What were some of the albums that you purchased that you can remember that you heard and then you have taken for yourself?
As in
like
that is
the way they talk, the way they walk, the way they put their songs together, the production.
Oh, that's good. I would say that maybe me. Okay, definitely Check Your Head.
Yeah.
By the Beastie Boys.
Yep.
That was a bit of a lifestyle manual for me. And maybe even Ill Communication even more. So at that point, the Beastie Boys were doing. They had their funk band, they had their punk band, they had the hip hop thing. They had a magazine called Grand Royal. They had so much output. They were interviewing Lee Scratch Perry in their magazine, and they were also, you know, sampling, I don't know, Jimmy Smith, like just this kind of overview of all the things that I liked. Yeah. And they did it in a way, and it was like skate culture, but it was also stoner culture. They were just super cool. They were just, at one point I do remember thinking the Beastie Boys were the three coolest dudes on the planet. And I was like, that is me. That's what I want to be.
Also like the birth of Rick Rubin and...
Yeah, but I wasn't into the Beastie Boys. I didn't listen to License to Ill when it came out.
Yeah.
That's a little bit before my time. I sort of came onto hip hop about 5 years after that. But I jumped on, like I knew Tribe Called Quest and then listened to, there's Q-Tips on a track on Ill Communication, and I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. These guys are cool. And then sort of, you know, found, you know, I mean, it was all sort of happening at the same time. But yeah, that would be a band or a group and an album that totally defined me. Another one, I guess.
Was it lyrically or musically for them?
Musically. I've never really thought that they were the greatest lyricists, but their vibe is like brilliant. Like, I think they do what they do really well. Yeah. But, lyrically, more maybe, I mean, the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, which became Spearhead.
Yep.
I feel a bit embarrassed to say this, but I really loved that record, this first Spearhead record, and the Disposable Heroes record. That's lyrically more maybe in my DNA as like that. I held that up as like great lyrics.
Yep.
Especially, you know, like the Disposable Heroes record a lot. What else? I mean, I would say Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan. By the time I finally realised that how brilliant Bob Dylan was, that was the record that did it for me.
Yep.
And there's a song called It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. That song is still lyrically maybe one of the greatest pieces of lyricism I've ever encountered. It's a perfect song. It's mental how good the lyrics are in that, and especially because Bob Dylan's flow sounds like a rap to me. Like he's crossing bars, he's got internal rhymes, but there's a melody, but the melody's very underplayed, and his tone is so full of blues and pain, but also kind of snarling cynicism. And
he's for someone who isn't into Bob Dylan, he's so easily dismissed, I think. People are just like, you know, and this similar sort of thing, like people will, you know, hear like, what's an example, like Camp Cope or someone for the first time, and they'll be like, wow, what is this? And then you're just like, oh man, it just means you haven't heard everything that's come before this stuff. That like, it's such a poetic, you know, like you know, watch Forrest Gump and tell me you don't like.
Yeah, I feel like there's always, you know, with an artist like that, there's got to be the gateway song, the song that, because Dylan for me, obviously, you know, growing up with my dad's love of Dylan, I heard a lot, like the whole discography. He's even got the basement tapes, and once you find, you know, because there's such a huge like back catalogue, once you find the right song and it lets you in, it's almost then you get let into all of the other rooms. Yeah. And, you know, like, I know for me the song was It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, but it could have easily have been Hurricane, which is another one where it feels like a rap, and it feels like, you know, it's punk as fuck. Like it's such a great energy. And then you can go back to the folk stuff and really appreciate, oh, cool, like the Ballad of Hattie Carroll, or the Ballad of a Thin Man, or you know, all this stuff. It's even Blowing in the Wind and all the big hits. You're like, oh man, they're genius. Like, but I totally, you know, I don't mind. I don't think it's an unusual position to not like Dylan, because, you know, it's so of a time, and so I guess it's like slow as well in its own way. Slow music doesn't have much place in the 21st century as much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Music that requires hard work. Yeah. That requires you to meet someone halfway. Doesn't really. Yeah. Like I think of fly. It doesn't, like a modern comparison would be. Doesn't hit the streaming numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a modern comparison, but like Vance Joy, but he's still extremely upbeat. But I'm just trying to think of people who like.
It's really upbeat. I mean, it's also really like think of bands, and I mean, I feel like the industry doesn't allow for. It doesn't have a great place for artists that require the listener to go through some level of discomfort with. Yeah, it's like it's got to be all there straight away, and here's the melody, and here's the. And I, you know what I think it is as well, as it's we've maybe passed the era where sort of ugliness is allowed to be in music as much in the popular mainstream as it once was. Now music is very pretty, and it's got to have a certain
accessible, and like no punches are being pulled.
Yeah,
well, and there are punches being pulled, but like not by the majority.
Yeah, not by the majority, not in a big pop sense.
Yeah, not to get on. There's no punches being pulled by Triple J or anything these days.
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm 44. I don't think I'm the audience to be able to find that stuff, access it, or know what's going on to the level that a 25-year-old should or is. But I definitely do keep my ears open, and I do feel like it's something to do with access. When you've got access to everything, nothing is that precious anymore.
Yep.
And, well, it's not that, yeah, it just is, it's all available.
Yep. Is there a particular producer that comes to mind when you first started like putting, multiple artists together and then finding the common thread that it was one producer who had their hand across all of them?
Yes, I can point to a few producers that I looked to and was really excited by the idea of fusing styles, genres, and bringing different artists together. One recent one, or maybe not so recent anymore, but the Danger Mouse and Gorillaz and Damon Albarn's, that record, Demon Days, I thought was a really great melding of hip-hop influences and singers and acoustic instrumentation and sort of rock culture and bringing those things together. And Danger Mouse himself, as a producer, did the Grey album, which was like sampling the Beatles and Jay-Z's Black album, which I thought was brilliant. On a being inspired by producers level, like George Martin and his work with the Beatles, I was obsessed with before I knew what the job even was. I still am deeply obsessed with the production of the Beatles and particularly that sort of 60s, late 60s, early 70s psychedelic period. And I think someone who took that and sort of ran with it into the modern era is a producer named John Bryan, who's produced Fiona Apple, but he also produced Kanye's second record. And he's done a lot of solo stuff, and he soundtracked. Which films has he sound? He's soundtracked a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson films, so Punch Drunk Love and some great sort of orchestral but folky, but with beats. Yeah, really great elements. When I sort of, I guess, took off the performer hat more from TZU and Joelistics and put on more of a producer hat, maybe I was looking, why was I looking at as inspiring? I mean, Rick Rubin always, and then maybe
Absolutely.
Nigel Godrich as a godlike producer. I think what he does with Radiohead, but he also has done with Beck, and being able to sort of embed himself in the palette of sounds and really, find the emotional truth of the music that he's working with a band, I think is really impressive.
Yep. What? When did you sort of start performing? And what was
like
your sort of goals when you first started performing?
Do you mean like as an adult or as a kid?
No, as in like the first time you like jumped on a stage and was like, I'm going to show people what I'm working on.
Right. So I was in a band in high school called the Baxters. Yep. Named after Beck. What was it? Beck Schofield, who was in a couple of years above us.
Yeah.
And we all had a massive crush on her. And I played drums.
Yeah.
And we did a battle of the bands at Balmain Town Hall in like, I don't know, whatever, 91 or something like that.
Yeah. And, your songs?
No, or like Jimi Hendrix covers, I think.
Yeah.
And that was cool. Like that was my first band. I was in, I was really young and loved the being in a bandness. Like just, you've got a little tribe, you got a little gang. But I got kicked out of that band. I know. God. And it was it was tough. It was tough at the time. It was a real learning life lesson. It was like, oh wow, if you get kicked out of your group, like that's a sort of social death of sorts. Yeah. But I started another band.
To the best of your understanding, what was the reason code for getting kicked out?
Well, I mean, we grew apart. The other three guys started playing water polo and rugby union, and I started to get more into Prince and Madonna, and it was just a different life path.
Yeah.
And not to put a too fine a point on it, but also Balmain, where I grew up, was a very rich suburb. These three guys were very fucking sort of a particular, socially more, they were from rich families. And my family we were my mum sold weed. I mean, we were like, I was a bad influence. Their parents thought I was a bad influence on them. Really, they, you know, one of them ended up becoming a merchant banker or something. He's a bit of a douche. You know, I mean, like, whatever. Well, that's fine. I don't have any problems with it. No. But, you know, like, we just didn't, our lives went like that. But what was cool was that I started another band called the Mechanical Bum Cheeks, which was much more of a punk kind of reggae band. Yeah. And then we had the next year's Battle of the Band, and both bands were in it. So my old band and my new band, and the new band won. Yeah. And beat the old band. And it was a...
Fuck water polo.
Yeah, fuck you, football players. It was a very gratifying moment. And I guess that the performing side of things, like that was, you know, playing drums and playing for your friends, and we played it like, you know, I think Blue Light Disco or something. But then this second band, the Mechanical Bum Cheeks, actually went on to play at pubs. Underage, we were underage. I was at this point year 9, year 10, and I liked for me, music culture has always been a place where misfits are allowed to gather and connect. And you don't have to play water polo or come from a good family or know what you're going to do with your life. It was a place where, you know, where you could come from various backgrounds, racial background, you know, ethnic backgrounds, look different, look weird, and you could fit in, and or fit in by not fitting in, you know, or at the time when the music culture I grew up was also equally, like, it was gender equal. There was a lot of, like, I remember a band called Nitocris. It was all these girls who played Guns N' Roses covers, and they were awesome. Like, we all hung out and talked music, and it was, to me, it was a really evolved subculture. The music scene, not without its problems, but my experience was like, I found my tribe. And so the performing of it was always about playing for those friends and other people. And I don't think I've ever been sort of a super nervous performer. I've actually always enjoyed it, but I don't think I'm a particularly extroverted person either. So it's like, and my relationship with performing is like, you know, at some point it just clicked over into, it just feels kind of natural, and I can roll with this. You know, I never put on a personality to get on stage, which I know some people do to get out of their everyday. But I also never felt, you know, like too shy on stage or something. So, you know, and obviously once you're moving from playing drums to rapping is a big jump in terms of what you're asking of yourself or of what you're giving to an audience. So that was a big thing. But probably the early days of getting into rapping and being in TZU, I mean, myself and the other guy who I rapped with, Pip, we used to do mental shit. Like after pulling an all-nighter on a lot of acid again, we went to Centrelink when Centrelink was the DSS, the Department of Social Security, and we at like 9 a.m. on like a Monday morning or it's Friday morning, I don't know what it was, but we jumped up on the desks at 9 a.m. and freestyled to the people waiting to hand in their form, and the poor people who were working at the like. What a horrible thing for us to do for a start. But we were like, this is a way that we pulled, you know, tear down our inhibitions.
We're selling T-shirts at the car park.
I mean, we were just loose as goose. Like, we were just like, let's just rap it, you know, and we would do it on trams and trains, and we busked a lot and all of this sort of stuff. And I think about it now, and it was atrocious music, but it was the art of like trying to like strip back and just deliver and have fun and, you know, and once you've done stuff like that, you can kind of get on a stage and rock it like it's like.
What are some of your like fondest memories of TZU?
I loved the early days. I really loved the sort of formative era of TZU when Australian hip hop hadn't really tipped over into it didn't have a big audience. It was a very tight community. Again, it was a really like
who was sort of sharing the stages with you at that point?
Oh man, the hoods. Actually, the Hilltop Hoods. There was a point in time where it felt like we would see the Hilltop Hoods and Downside on all of the festival bills, and we'd get booked, and one of those two groups would get booked, and we'd see them quite a bit. And it was cool because, you know, there was an underground hip hop scene which was a bit more tough than we were. So that was like, you know, a lot of Melbourne groups actually, and Melbourne rappers that were sort of from that, maybe from the graph subculture more. But just like, you know, gutter, gangster, sort of Melbourne gangster. And then there was the more musical, live, funky stuff. That's where we sort of, that's the territory we were in. And
TZU was like a band, wasn't it? Like
eventually. Actually, originally it was 4 of us. It was like 2 rappers, a producer who was playing an SP808, like a Roland's sampler live on stage, and a turntablist. So that was the original setup for like, I think we played like that for about 5 or 6 years. And then we brought on a keyboard player, and then we brought on a band, and it sort of grew and grew. And so what originally had been like 4 friends driving around really and touring in hire cars became, you know, I think upwards of, at one point, like, I don't know, 16 or 17 people, something like that for a big crew. And yeah, I mean, like the sort of maybe my fondest memories of those sort of early days when hip hop was just sort of, I don't know, it was sort of like breaking in Australia in a significant kind of way where you could survive and do big gigs, and we were at that forefront, and we were touring, and we were, you know, writing lots of music and freestyling a lot, and you know, you'd end up after a gig at some party in the back streets of Launceston, and I loved that stuff. That adventure was brilliant. You know, but like every band, it's, you know, once you've sort of become a bit more professional and everything kind of lifts its game, it becomes a different thing.
Was everything achieved that you set out to with TZU?
Nah, no way. I mean, I think
what was sort of the headline achievements?
Oh, the headline achievements. We played a lot of big festivals to big crowds. So we did the Big Day Out, I think 3 times, like the whole tour. The Falls Festival, we played at the main stage at like, I want to say like we did one year, which I think was the 12 o'clock turnover, like the countdown. And then we did one year either side of that, like 1 a.m. and then like 11, like good slots where people are loose and everything's crazy and you know, having a big, good time. And, you know, one of the things that I really, really regret is that TZU we didn't get to travel overseas and play. And we had quite a extensive sort of tour of Europe booked for the Computer Love tour, but Pip got quite sick before we went on that the tour, the national tour, and we couldn't do the international side of it. And then that's sort of when everything started. We took a big break after that. So that would be one of my things. I was like, oh, damn, I wish we'd got to go overseas a bit more. As far as like creatively, I feel we said a lot, but there's a few things. There's a few, you know, I mean, I look back and there's a feeling of like, there were some elements of TZU that I wished we'd taken more care with, and some elements that I wished we'd not worried about. And I think what happened was we got quite a bit of Triple J attention, and that started to influence a lot of the material we wrote, for better or worse, and it kind of kept us going. But there's a point where a lot of bands just tip over and you stop, you know, Triple J, you're not the hot act. And I wish we'd just abandoned the whole mindset at that point and said, okay, cool, that's not our thing anymore, let's do this, and gone into a more eccentric path. But we sort of tried to keep one foot in each camp a bit.
Once your time with TZU had wrapped up, so did TZU just disbanded, did it?
Not really. I mean, we did we had a few big breaks and we kept coming back and doing sort of, we did Millions of Moments, and I'd sort of already put out a Joelistics solo record at that point. And we did actually, with Millions of Moments, we really wanted to try and explore sort of more psych rock sort of, you know, I guess like a less radio friendly sound and more experimental, but it kind of got caught somewhere in between radio and experimental. And we did that record, and because at that point, the other three members all had kids at that point, and it was just an unsustainable thing to kind of keep playing in this band that had once, generated quite a lot of income and now was not. It was a weird time. I mean, it was like everything. It ran its course, but we never actually said, hey, like, let's call it a day.
Yep.
Well, technically, we're still in a band together.
Yep. Yeah, good. So Joelistics became your focus.
Yeah. It did.
Was there a time period of sort of, or downtime between that, or did you sort of
there was actually
and go straight into it?
No, there was a period I took a year off to travel, and I went and lived. It's a bit longer than a year. I lived in China, in Shanghai first, and then in Beijing, and then a little bit in Mongolia, and then I traveled over to Europe, and I lived in Paris and in Berlin, and so all up for a period. There was a sort of a period of like 4 or 5 years where, for a whole year I was away, but then every winter in Australia I would go and live over, mostly in Berlin, but a bit in Paris as well. Anyway, just, and I'd save money from touring, and I'd save money from working or whatever job I had at the time. And then I'd go and write music or play and do stuff overseas, and had quite a community of friends and peeps over there. And, and so there was a sort of a break, a lull in the TZU records where I kind of just went out and into the world and just were like, what else is going on other than music? And then came back to Australia and in 2010 and sort of picked up the Joelistics thing and went, okay, cool, let's rock this. And at this point I was sort of just starting to produce. So really one of my favorite producers is the other guy who rapped in TZU, Pip Norman. He's a fantastic producer, and he's taught me heaps, and I would say he's a bit further down the path in terms of technique and skill of production. And so when I got back and started doing the Joelistics thing, I think I did some work with him, and I started to learn about, okay, cool, what would be my sound? What would be the thing that I would push towards? And it was probably something that blended hip hop, but also, more indie rock elements to it. And I think the first Joelistics record, Voyager, was my sort of my experiment in trying to like bring some of that guitar and synth stuff to hip hop. And and I listened to it the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, I got some of that kind of in the right zone. And now I feel like my actual production chops are way better, and I'm like, oh cool, actually I know what I'm trying to do. And it's often working in these like grey areas between genres. I've never been a great genre writer where I'm like, I'm going to write a straight up hip hop record. I've never really written a straight up hip hop record. It's always had something else that sort of kind of moves it. And I think that's one of my production calling cards or signatures or whatever, is just like to try and bring a few disparate elements together, even performers, like that singer and this style or this band and this, like I'm often trying to find the thing that goes against the grain. Was Joelistics like initial stages for you to be an MC or to be sort of a solo artist? It's just to be a solo artist. Like I always wanted to rap for half the gig and play weird synths and vocal pedals for half the gig. But I mean, I also was aware that when you go and rock a crowd, they just sort of want to hear you rap and jump around. And I knew that
hard balance being to sort of cater towards the rap market, but also be a musician.
At
the same time.
I do remember around the sort of like 2010 to 2014. Also, I mean, hip hop is in quite a creative place now. But back then there was a real, and especially in Australia, it was a real like conservative, creative idea of what hip hop should be. And I think it's because Australian hip hop has often had to assert its identity outside of the paradigm of American hip hop. It's always going to get compared to it. It's always going to be influenced by it, and it's somewhat derivative of it. And so because of that, it adopted quite a kind of like keep it real stance, which was like, it's got to be this to be hip hop. Like it's got to have this, 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 and this, and this. And if you're going, no, but I want to bring in some like lap steel guitar, and I'm going to have like, a choir and whatever crazy eccentric thing you want to bring in. People are like, yeah, but that's not really hip hop then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I picture it to be quite hard to, I don't know, for want of a better term, like find your twang as like as an Australian hip hop MC or vocalist in the terms of like, I worked with Illy a long time ago, and he was like showing the guys like some of the demos he was getting sent for his like was it 1-2 label or whatever it is he has, and he was just like, yeah, it's really good, but just like it's an Australian hip hop artist putting on an American accent, and it's just really confusing. And he's just like, I'm just not really into that. And then I kind of go like, fuck, what do you do? Like, what if you don't want to be classified as like an Australian hip hop artist, you know, with that like Australiana, you know, twang to it? It's kind of a hard balance beam. And, you know, you've got like the streets and all that sort of stuff who's like, you know, grime and all that sort of stuff. It's quite a specific thing. Is it something you sort of had in mind as to, well, I suppose, I mean, you've always had your MC ability, and like, have you ever sort of, I guess, shaped your MCing or your style based on your geography?
Yeah, I mean, TZU, that was a big philosophy for TZU, was we wanted to create a sound that felt distinctly Australian, or distinctly so-called, you know, I mean, so-called Australia.
Yep.
We wanted to bring something that felt like it related to what we knew, the country we grew up in, the culture we knew, the landscapes that we saw, and we wanted to rap in our own accents. We wanted to use, but I mean, we didn't lean into it so heavy that it became a kind of extension of the accent or something. Like we didn't kind of over accentuate it. We just, I think we kept it somewhere in this sort of ambiguous accent zone, which, you know, was just, we just rapped the way we talked. And but it was a conscious discussion. I mean, we used to, when Pip and I first started rapping in the early days, I think we had American accents just because we listened to American rap. And so it would filter into our, and I remember there being a really distinct period of having to go, cool, how would you rap this line? Because I keep wanting to rap it like this, but it sounds too American. And so we'd actually, you know, paid attention to trying to like bend it into a more natural place. And when some recording sessions, we'd be like, whoa, maybe, you know, and we'd sort of pull each other up and check each other and say like, you know, just check that you're not like leaning too far into the sort of a New York twang on that line, or, you know, a slang, not so much what you wrote, but just more like, don't, you know, let's not try and sound like that. Let's try and sound like this.
Is that something that's quite heavily discussed in like the hip hop course at Box Hill?
Not really, because I don't feel, I think the discussion happens, but I don't think you can, I don't want to tell anyone how to
find
rap.
your own voice.
You got to find your own voice. And I think that, you know, like we're in an age where one of the planet's biggest rap stars is a young Indigenous kid from Sydney, or from outer Western Sydney, called the Kid Leroy, who I believe raps in an American accent. Yeah. But I think that's not even a discussion anyone's having. They're just like, whoa, he's like, you know, he's doing mega numbers, and he's this amazingly sort of global superstar.
What was his name?
The Kid Leroy.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, it's a thing. And, you know, with that thing comes a whole lot of people going, cool, I can do that too. And so the accent debate, you know, again, when I talk about that period where TZU was coming up, like accents were you could get into a fight if you rapped in an American accent. There was a real divide between rappers who rapped in an American accent and rappers who rapped in an Australian accent. And, you know, what maybe won the war was that basically radio went, cool, we're going to support the ones who rap in an, you know, Triple J basically went, yeah, we're going to go with the ones who rap in an Australian accent. And so I can think of heaps of really good rappers from the early 2000s who, some of the best rappers in the country, but they rapped in an American accent, and they're just, you know, no one knows them.
Well, I guess you put yourself in the ocean of American accents. In rap. Whereas, you know, it's the motherland of rap, really.
You're suddenly, but also like, you know, a big thing for my experience of hip hop, a big thing is to represent authentically who you are and where you're from and what your story is.
Yep.
And if you open your mouth and someone's like, this could be some kid from Minnesota or from
Yep.
New York, then you've almost already thrown people off the track,
Yep.
So, and I don't have a thing for or against the accent now. I think somewhere along the way I went, oh yeah, the voice is an instrument. You use your instrument in a way. I prefer to hear someone who can flow rather than how they accent it. I just want to know that they write cool shit and they can sit on a beat and it sounds dope.
Yeah, like my favorite MC, I'm not sure if you can call her an MC, but by far is like Sampa the Great. Like her flow,
her tone.
Her just like her phrasings are just like as a drummer,
it's next level.
Like she's queen.
She's Queen Sampa. She really is.
It's to this day one of the best gigs I've ever seen was the last Golden Plains, whatever year ago it was, and it was the first time I'd seen her full production and also with the new album, and it was as if all the trees in the supernatural amphitheater were grown for her. So like, I mean,
great.
I was in my own state, but man, like the production team and all that sort of stuff, like they used all the lights in like the crowd to like time coded and perfectly. The visuals and stuff were perfect, but it was just like a headline Coachella set at Meredith.
Fantastic.
And it was just like supreme.
Yeah.
And I just like,
she's really next level.
Walking back to the campsite,
she
just
really
like
is next level.
On like I'd just seen Christ himself just walk past me. And to this, like, I goosebumps just thinking about that set.
So what's really cool is that actually we went and saw Sampa play at the Northcote Social Club for her. Like, I feel she said it was like her second ever gig as Sampa the Great. I know she'd come from like a spoken word background and had probably done shows, but like this was a Sampa show.
Yeah.
She was still playing with Godriguez, who was her first producer, and he'd put together this little sort of band, and I just remember like being like, I mean, like, shut the door. Like that's as good as hip hop that's going to come from this country is ever going to get.
Yeah.
Like this is like witnessing, sort of seeing like Kendrick or someone. Yeah. Where you're like, wow, we're going to be, this is an all timer.
Yeah.
And
I mean, when you're talking about accents, I mean, someone who I'm not sure how long she based herself in Australia for, but to like live in Australia but still call like Zambia home and just sing, such powerful lyrics and all that sort of stuff in reference to home, like it's just so powerful that someone who defines themselves in Australia can have such connection with Africa and all that sort of thing, and that's really what I love about the Australian music scene is when I think about Australia Day conversation and all that sort of stuff and changing the date, and I'm just like, I mean, Sampa the Great's the best Australian artist I could ever think of. Like, and that's multiculturalism at its best, and it's just like Australia is. I don't think Sampa the Great, and I could be wrong, but this is my prediction, that I don't think Sampa the Great would be what we know. It might be a different thing, but if she didn't spend this time in Australia, it would have been maybe a different beast.
Yeah, for sure.
With different inspirations and that sort of stuff. And that's the melting pot that I love about Australian music so much, is that we're all visitors, to this land and all that sort of stuff. But it's that melting pot of multiculturalism that spews out that amazing, unique music, but still has that connection to home, which is Zambia for her.
One of the interesting things that I remember when TZU started to tour a lot in the early days was that we realized that predominantly the more you travel and play like small towns and even like Brisbane or Perth, like you realize that actually Australia's really, the mainstream band culture is a super white culture. And it's a super...
Especially in Melbourne.
Yeah, well, for me, Melbourne is and Sydney has at least a large metropolis thing, which is there's a lot of scenes going on.
Yep.
But when you go and play in like Albury, or you go and play in, in Bunbury,
Yep.
your crowd is predominantly going to be white, and it's predominantly going to be white dudes,
White working class. Yeah.
working class, maybe up, who knows? But like generally white dudes, and they're going to come, and when they come to that show, what we started to see was like that brings its own energy, and often people want to see themselves reflected in the artists that they see on stage. So it was no surprise to us that when I first got into hip hop in Australia, I felt like it was super multicultural, it was super gender diverse, and it was quite open-minded. But as it kind of hit the bigger audiences and mainstream, it became more white dudes representing it, because that's the audience. And I have my own feelings and thoughts on what that does to the music and et cetera, but you can't hate on the reality of who's going to gigs and what that looks like.
Yep.
Like, it's no surprise that 360 was as big as he was, or Illy. They represent the audience they play for in a really clear way. And I think, just to bring it back to our experiences at TZU, we had, I'm half Chinese, our DJ is Pakistani Australian. Like we were a little bit different, and we kind of reveled in our difference, and we talked about racism in the raps, and we tried to confront this stuff, and in some ways we hit a ceiling because of that, I think, as well. Like there was cool, you guys you're that sort of inner city voice, or that sort of, you're that left wing.
When you say ceiling, do you mean like limited?
I think so. And I would say that Sampa has a certain limit within Australia, because she's black. She's she's representing a culture that most of Australia still wrestles with the idea that anyone could relate to that it's basic xenophobia and prejudice and racism, but it's also just like, you just need to turn on The Bachelor or whatever commercial TV station, and you can see what Australia sees itself as. And I think that that travels down into the music industry.
Because you referenced earlier that like Ice Cube and those sort of artists, that what they were singing about was, influential to you. It fascinates me that you saw that when you breached those topics, you found it limiting.
I think it's not that I found the topics limiting. It's that I found the audience's appreciation of what their artists and stars and representatives can be limiting. So I still do think that. I think so-called Australia has a real problem with people who are not, Anglo and of a particular kind of, even a particular sort of style. Like I think, the Chinese might have been here since the 1850s, and you might have, indigenous culture is rich, thriving, and just as healthy in some areas as it's ever been, but I don't think mainstream Australia can deal with that stuff. I don't think it can really embrace it in the same way that it can get behind, whoever, Dave Hughes or whatever. Yep. It's just, it happens, of course, and it's happening more and more every day. But I still think that there's a really limited scope for some of that stuff, and a lot of that is this sort of myth building of who we are and all that stuff, what stories we have to tell and whatnot. But the immigrant story is not sort of held up to the same degree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is crazy to me, because we're all, like you say, we're all immigrants, we're all settlers here, and we're all, this concept of like Australia sees itself as the underdog. Actually, the immigrants and Indigenous people and people from minority voices, from diverse sort of sexual orientations or identities, that's the underdogs. And that's the real true spirit of the Anzacs or whatever. It's like, it's such there's such an irony to it. Anyway, we tried to broach this stuff. I've always tried to speak to this in music because I think it's just one way of me being able to let it out. Like whether it's overtly political or coming from a personal place, I've always thought that it's valid to tell that story, to shake those power structures and to say, what the fuck? Like, that's been a big part of it.
Yeah, perfect. Your time traveling, did you, from listening to the new record, Film School, did you have sampling ability in those travels?
I did.
Yeah, so were you sampling a lot of sounds from this new record on that travel? Through so China and Mongolia,
well, not through that. Mostly what happened for Film School was that I went to Malaysia. I was born in KL, and so my mum's like, oh, let's go back to the house where you were born. I want to show it to you. And so we went on a trip in 2018 to KL, and while we were there, we went and saw the house, which had been, I think, just demolished, but then rebuilt into a sort of different facade, which is where I was born. But while we stayed in KL for quite a while, and I went and I found this record store. This is like this dodgy little CD shop in the Chinatown markets, and I found all these old sort of 70s canto pop and Taiwanese pop records. Bought a stack of them, and I had an MPC Live, which has the ability to sample. So I was loading a lot of the CD stuff that I had up onto my computer and sampling and writing beats. And actually a lot of those beats ended up as tracks on the Film School record. So weirdly, it was like the trip had all this family history reasons that sort of underpin why I went to Malaysia. And then getting that music and then getting it and knowing that it was sort of made sort of, it was what was sort of being played around the time I was born. All that stuff just sort of resonated, and I was like, "Oh yeah, cool. This is good." Even if I pitch it right down or have it really low in the mix, or I just bend the samples as much as possible, it's somehow it's borrowing from the past, and it's like echoing something that I really vibe with. And I like that with tracks. Like I like the idea of having little sonic, like little Easter eggs for me that are emotional or nostalgic, but they might not. That might not be apparent or overt.
Yeah, I mean, upon first listen of the album, my initial thoughts is how much I miss traveling.
Oh yeah,
and it's those like clearly like soundscape style sampling rather than like typical sample culture of finding a pre-existing record of that sort of. Was there a lot of soundscape sort of influence to that sort of stuff, opposed to you know, finding that 4-bar beat break repeat sort of style of sampling?
It's funny because it's still, the stuff on Film School has still got a lot of loop, like loops, but the loops are either shorter or weirder, like weird looping loops. Because I finished a lot of the record last year, and I had that experience that I think a lot of people did, which was like life became a loop. It was just like it had this repetitive Groundhog Day quality to it during lockdown, and so that made its way into the music. And I was like, oh, cool. Actually, I can see why this structurally this is mirrors this, and it feels right. But yes, to answer your question, all the soundscape and ambient influences is actually kind of closer to my music tastes now than maybe a lot of the previous Joelistics stuff. That's kind of what I rock at home, and I like. I really like Can and krautrock. You know, I went through this phase of just like buy a lot of weird German kraut music. You know, like, sort of like driving music, like you say, traveling music. You know, it's just like hits this hypnotic groove or zone, and then it sort of just like trips out and blurs out at the edges. And I brought a lot of that influence into the Film School stuff. But it's also I do remember at one point when I was writing the record, I was like, oh, cool, this could be the kind of record that if you were backpacking through Asia, like through Thailand, this might be a great soundtrack for that. So
100%.
It's that sort of like there's a groove, but it's also like you can.
It's got those tastes of exactly like backpacking. It's sipping mojitos by the pool bar. It's visiting a temple and having a self reflection. It's got a bit of everything.
Yeah, great.
I wanted to my pick of the album so far. I haven't dove in as deep into it as I like because this was a fresh link you sent me. But the opening track, I'm into it.
Yeah,
It's
great.
Yeah, just the textures and just the backbeat. But like, there's a lot of like.
Oh, you're a drummer. You would. I mean, this feel is that.
Yeah.
It's the 3/4 thing where it sits just somewhere between 4 and 3,
Yep.
which feels good.
But just going forward to like the last chorus, like those little sprinkles of arpeggiators and stuff. That stuff just
So this one,
key to my heart.
this track is definitely from. Has got samples from that trip to Malaysia, all the vocal samples.
Yep.
And I was, there's some loops, there's some samples you take. You can just like once you've got it sitting right, you can just listen to it for hours. And I really vibed out on this one hard. The other thing, Aiden, is I'm a massive synthesizer nerd. I fucking love analog synths, and a lot of this record was like building a beat. And then just layering synths and synths and synths
like modular synths or like in particular.
That's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
No.
Is there a particular synth in this record that is featured?
Yes, the CS50.
Yeah.
The Beast.
Yeah.
The first synth that I ever bought. This is
Old Faithful.
Oh, dude, I got it for $400 at a secondhand music store in Melbourne around the TZU days, and I didn't know. It's taken me, so that would have been in 2002.
Yep.
I've had this synth close to 20 years. It was made the year in 76, so a year before I was born. It is a lifetime synth. Like it's one of those synths that every time I sit down and I can go, wow, I just got a sound I've never got out of this synth.
Just
before.
an inspirational.
It's the one. It's the one. It's the gold. It's one of the golden, the golden few. I think the CS50 and its bigger brother, the CS80, is.
Yep.
It's what Vangelis wrote the Blade Runner soundtrack on. It's what Stevie Wonder was all over.
Who makes it?
It's a Yamaha synth. The CS50. So there's a CS50, there's a 60, and there's an 80. The 80 is like massive. It's
it looks sick.
But the 50 is the one I've got. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be that's the key signature synth for this record.
Yep.
And probably the MPC Live is a key piece of gear that made it on. But look, this record was also deeply about collaboration. So there's a lot of people on this record. There's a lot of players and a lot of.
What was the thought process on stepping back from the microphone and basically
writing an instrumental record?
Writing your display home for producing, really.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, even the stuff that I produce, like the stuff that I would do with Haiku Hands or Moju or, other artists is not even like, it's not as out as this. It's much more in a more, I don't know, like songy and pop even. But with this stuff, it's more like, I think every producer who works with electronic stuff has hours and hours of music that is just their sort of experimentation and their tweaks, and they're sort of like, I'm going to try this and I want to see what,
just like a texture library.
And this is my texture library record. This is, and I know that it's like somewhat indulgent, but it was a good last year. What the hell? If you're going to do something, you got all that time in your hands, like finish the ambient indulgent record. And I was like, I'm going to dive headlong into it. Like, and I also had like friends like Mindy Meng Wang who plays guzheng, Chinese harp.
Yeah, awesome.
And she's playing on a number of these tracks, and another friend named Francesca Mountford who plays cello, and Parvin sings on 2 tracks. And a lot of it's from material that was made or started pre-lockdown between 2018 and 2020. And then it sort of morphed into last year, me just getting all this material and going, cool, I'm going to take all these elements and try and weave something cohesive together.
Is this the most that Joelistics has collaborated?
No, not really, because the last 5 years, that's all I've done. Like for the last 5 years, I've worked with other artists to try and help them realize their vision. Except for like, I did a record
with the Joelistics banner though. I'm saying.
With the Joelistics banner, I did a record with Mojo Juju, who became Moju. I did a whole album with her. But yeah, this is the most diverse and sort of eclectic collaborations. I guess it is actually.
What's your favorite track?
Probably the last one, Lucid Dreams, which has my friend Matt Robb playing guitar. There's no beat. It's just I wrote this chord progression on the CS50, and the bar links are all. I think it's like 6, 3, 5 in terms of the amount of times you're sitting on chords. And I just, again, it was something I just loved playing, and I loved showing it to other musicians, and then getting that sort of hypnotic quality from something that's just a bit bent to the left. And Fran plays cello on this one, and it's beautiful. And then it sort of builds at the end. There's this sort of synth kind of orchestra, but a lot of like kind of cross-modding, distorted synth stuff. And for me, it's I've always had this real love of like Montreal post-rock stuff, like Godspeed You Black Emperor, and this for me is that it heads into that territory. So I love this track.
It's so nice. It's a new luxury with all this brand new gear that I've got to be able to listen to music and talk. It's like it's quite hypnotic, especially with a song such as Lucid Dreams. This is my current favorite. There's all this, and also Fool with Haley Kramer. That's probably, if I had to play someone the two songs that kind of represent the record, I think those two would be good contenders. Fools, it sort of sits somewhere closer to what I would do for other artists or Joelistics, and yet it sort of sits nicely on this record as well. Who's on your hit list to collaborate with in the future?
That's a good question. Who would I love to collaborate with in Australia?
Considering, go the hypothetical that sky's the limit.
Well, if the sky was the limit and it was like open to all... I tell you one thing that has come up, which I hope comes off, is I got in touch... someone got in touch with me from a gamelan orchestra based in Dandenong, and said, would you like to be an artist in residence for our orchestra? It's a 30-piece orchestra.
Wow.
We play traditional gamelan, but we also do some contemporary pieces, and an artist in residence can write music and work with the orchestra. And so
gamelan is like a sort of like an Eastern orchestra.
It's like an Indonesian bell orchestra. So it's often it's arpeggiating patterns in rounds, but the rounds sort of time-wise can move across quite a lot of different time signatures. So someone could be playing in 5 and someone could be playing in 3 and someone can... Maths. It's really dense, but but when you hear it, it's actually really beautiful. It's actually a lot like synth music. And I the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is kind of my dream collaboration right now. Is like, it means, because I talk like I know what I'm talking about with gamelan. I really am I don't know much. I know a little bit, and I know that it's a deep discipline, which I would love to understand more. So for me, that concept of like, oh, cool, you can learn this whole kind of new school, and even in tuning, the way things are tuned is micro-tuned. And so, that's a great one. In terms of like, my all-time artist that I would love to have or would love to work with Yasin Bey, Mos Def, as a if it came to like the rapper, or probably Doom maybe was at the top of the list. Now, Yasin Bey is maybe second. In terms of singers, there's so many singers that I would be like, I can only really think locally at the moment because everything has to be thought locally. Gareth Lydiard is like one of my all-time faves. There's a singer named Jaguar Jones. I quite like what she does at the moment. you know.
She's like also a guitarist, isn't she?
I think she's just. I've only seen her sing. Maybe she plays guitar as well. I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I mean, I don't really. It's funny you should ask. I don't really have a kind of wish list in a way. I'm struggling to think of artists that I'd be like, ooh, that'd be great. But it's more.
Would you sort of like is it quite open-ended to the fact that it could be anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Which is an exciting but also like powerful inspiration.
The other thing is after doing this record and also having a lot of time to kind of do my own thing last year, I was like, actually, I think I caught the bug to release more solo music.
Yep.
And I think it's also having Lua, like having a daughter and kind of thinking about life and, you know, what she might listen to of my music. I suddenly feel like I've got a lot more to say. And big kind of lull of being a vocalist or being a rapper was me kind of going, I think for the time being, I've said a lot of what I wanted to say.
Yep.
And now I can kind of feel myself going, oh no, actually I've got a bit more to say, you know.
Yeah.
I want to write some more songs and I want to write some more vocal songs. So definitely I think that's where my head's at now, is rather than like, hey, I'd love to work with this person. It's more, actually I'm want to just write some songs for myself, for my daughter.
Yeah. Having freshly, you know, had your firstborn, are you sort of, I think you just answered it, but like, are you picturing what you put back into the world through your music?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely feel, I can't help but think, what will 16-year-old Lua think of this?
Yeah.
A little bit, just like, you know, I mean, I'm sure it'll be totally uncool.
Yeah.
It'll be like, Dad, that is just whack.
Yeah.
But
get out of my room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get out of my room. I want to play video games.
Yeah.
You know, like whatever. But I think it's also like having Lua, I really can't stress enough how much like my relationship with time has shifted, and I have got less of it. And the time that I do have, I want to do stuff that I really want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be really present. I want to be really make it essential, because you don't have, it's gone are the days where it's like, oh yeah, 3 days can go by and I don't care if I don't do it, whatever, nothing happens. Now I'm like, hey, cool, I got 2 hours to be in the studio. Let's use that really well.
Yep.
Let's make something great.
Yep. Cool. Sorry, I might just turn this off because I imagine hearing your own stuff while you're trying to talk is quite distracting. How do you? Where's your ideal performance space for this record?
Maybe the ideal performance space. So the show that we're putting together for this record is an 8-piece band.
Yep.
And nothing played to sequences.
Yep.
And 3 dancers and projections, like video, film, looping, VJing.
Yep.
And so maybe the ideal, if I could play anywhere, it would be like the Astor Theatre or something.
Yep.
And be able to have the visuals be really quite epic.
Yep.
And
Astor's in St Kilda?
The Astor's in the old one in St Kilda.
Yeah, the one on the...
But also like I mean, any of those old theatres, like the Westgarth, the Astor, where else would totally be my alley? Even like the Thornbury Picture House. Yeah. Like just a great cinema with a good sound system. Yep. That had the ability to maximise the visuals but also have dancing and the live band thing. And, like the funny thing is that now rehearsing with the band, and it's a great band, I've gone, I'd love to, I'd love if I did a film school part 2, I would do a lot more live recording, acoustic recording. So it's sort of weirdly the putting together the live show has opened up this whole kind of much more bandy kraut vibe than is actually in the record. Yeah, and I imagine performing it in front of people for the first time will inspire its evolution to that next step. I think so.
I've been listening pretty heavily to this. You would still call him like a country bluegrass guy, which is really not up my style, but a guy called Sturgill Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
He was straight up bluegrass country, but then he just sort of went, fuck it, I'm going to do this like prog rock industrial album. And it is like,
cool.
I recommend anyone to check this album out. It is like, it's a movie.
Yeah.
Great. So it's made to be consumed as an album, not on random, they all tie into each other.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also released it with a anime on Netflix.
Oh,
so you can actually watch it from it's a 47-minute album.
Yep.
But I highly recommend checking it out. Sturgill Simpson. It's very sample based, like industrial, almost like Black Keys meets like 9 Inch Nails.
Awesome.
It's really, really cool
I
stuff.
love it.
But then his other stuff, how did this happen?
Yeah.
It's really weird. So if you chuck on like Sturgill Simpson radio on Spotify, it's super confusing.
I think I gather that Joelistics radio is probably quite confusing these days as well. Because there's a lot of other voices on. With this record, there's Parvin and there's Hayley Kramer. H is her artist name. And I guess a lot of people who listen to TZU or Joelistics know me as a rapper. I don't even think many people would even know or even care about the production or who produced it. It's like, oh yeah, that's the rap dude.
Yeah.
And so, this is definitely throwing a bit of a spanner in the works.
Yeah. Is it quite unique or rare to have MCs being the main songwriter? I mean, not necessarily in in a solo scenario, but I mean, having basically, is something like a Hilltop Hoods or a, let's go with Hilltop Hoods, like the two MCs, I imagine, aren't the ones recording.
Actually, no. I think Safa produced the majority of their early stuff. I don't know if he does anymore, but he's a great producer. He's got a really great sound and really good feel. I think locally, I think you would find a lot of MCs who are also producers. Actually,
Good.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's a real. I think there's a lot of MCs, but then there's a lot of, because the industry is just smaller and everyone's got to do more jobs, and so that's something that people.
Is a lot of the students doing like the hip hop course, are they predominantly MCs or are they into the full production?
Actually, they're predominantly MCs, but there's a lot of them that are like, I want to get into production, and they're kind of getting their chops on as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about production is like, it takes a long time to find your feet and your sound. Well, actually, I lie in a way. Now these days, you can loop up a couple of splice loops and boom, you're away.
Yep.
But if you really want to go deep, it's like it's a science and you got to learn a lot of stuff.
Yep. When you're either on the road or at home, how do you look after yourself?
When I haven't been on the road for ages, when I'm on the road, I run.
Yep.
Jog in the morning. At the moment, my mental health is a lot to do with. So, I do the morning shift with Lua, so I'm up at 6 a.m. and then walk her for maybe an hour around the parks of Brunswick, and then go home. And so that first hour of the morning is gold. I love it.
Yep.
I have a coffee, go for a walk.
Yep.
Pushing my daughter through the streets. It's awesome.
Yep.
But in terms of like, how to kind of maintain my mental health on the road, I do remember like needing to kind of take time to chill. Like, I think gone are the days where I was like, 24/7, I'm on the road, I'm accessible with people all around me all the time. I need to have a point where I'm like, I've got to check out and go and have some, chill time. That's one of the ways that I used to definitely sort of maintain that lifestyle. Also, just not take everything that is offered to you.
Yeah.
You don't need to follow every single invitation.
You don't need to be happy all the time.
Don't need to be happy all the time.
Because sometimes when you're not happy, you're still pretty happy.
Yeah. It's you know,
and if you're always that happy, sometimes you're not that happy.
When you first start, and people are like, and everything's coming, and people, and it's all happening. Yeah, it's great, but there's a point where it's like, wow, this is relentless. Like,
yeah.
And I think it's a really nice thing to get to a point where you're like, I like saying no. I like saying no to things. Like, I like saying no to projects. I like saying no to this. I like saying no to what you're offering. This.
Yeah, it's definitely the art of saying no is something I wish to exercise. Not that I would have said no to a lot of things in the past, but it's just, I don't know. I feel like if you say no, you've got yourself in mind rather than you can think of a bigger picture when you say no. And whereas if you're just the guy who's always like, yes, 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 that's what turns your passion into like a mindless job.
Yeah.
I feel so.
It's also where you start to let people down. And I don't like that.
Yeah.
It's like if you're...
And you burn yourself out.
If you overpromise if you say you can do shit and you actually don't have the time, you're doing a disservice not just to you, but to them in the future. And once you realize it's like, cool, let me like under-promise and over-deliver. That's a way better situation. So let me take more off my plate, do less, but do it really well. That's a really good thing.
I wish I did that for a lot of things I've done in the last couple of years. Like, I pre-COVID, I burnt myself out by just not only promising, but just trying to give the world to a lot of the artists and stuff I was working with, and it was just unsustainable. And it inspired me to start a podcast that touches on mental health and that sort of stuff. But absolutely, it's that balance beam of understanding what can be delivered and making those impossible scenarios impressive.
Oh, the other element from being a producer that I really am aware of is like when I first started out playing music, and especially as an artist, I could go and do epic sessions that would start at 12 p.m. and then finish at 4 a.m. And I could do 4 of them in a row and I'd be fine. I'd love it. I'd thrive off it. But now if I'm in the studio and it gets to like 6 or 6:30 or 7, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm done. Like, I'm going to go home now. Yep. And that drawing that boundary and saying, this is where my day, we don't have unlimited time with each other.
Yep.
And I don't have time to just hang out. I want to do work or I want to go and hang out with my family.
Yep.
They're the two things that I'm about at the moment.
It's like supreme, like brain allocation to be creative has like a time limit.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, a friend Tyson, shout out to Tyson, who runs the Alamo Studios. He's had bands that come in and, there's a day rate, but it's an unspecific day rate. If you come in at 8 in the morning and want to go to 3 in the morning, like if it's all productive, it's good stuff. But like I imagine when producing other bands and that sort of stuff, having those bands that are crunching the numbers and trying to get as most out of your time as that is available would be kind of counterproductive to the creativity that could, develop in a productive environment.
Yeah, I think also it's like I've got dependables now. Like I've got people who I need to go and be present for, and I want to be present when I'm with them. And that requires me to have a cutoff point. And if you set your cutoff point, then it's really clear. And it doesn't matter, even if you're like, if someone thinks they're on a vibe and, oh my God, I'm sorry, but we worked out this earlier on. This is the point where I have to go and do this now. And
that's the art of saying no shit. Same stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And it will make me a better producer / person if I can do that. And I definitely feel like, it's a real sort of new artist's mindset to just go, I just go for hours and days on end and fuck the world and whatever, it doesn't matter and I don't need to eat and all that stuff. Like I remember that state, and it's kind of cool, but it's not sustainable.
Yep.
Once you get to a certain point, when
Yep.
when this is your job and this is what you do, you can't really continue to give like that.
Yeah. Like I've been working with a couple of artists, and like album number 2 idea is to like go and get a house in somewhere remote and, you know, just party, but have a really productive time. And I look at it and go, yeah, that would be so much fun. But then I go like, would it be good for the music? And it stresses me out.
It depends on what the kind of the music is and the people, and like, and you know, if that's the way that people tap into their thing, then that's the way they tap into their thing. But I do think that a lot of people think that's the way they tap into their thing. Yeah. And it's actually not.
Yeah.
It's like they're just trying to avoid the work.
How about we go and get a house, party, and then come back and record?
Yeah. Or I mean,
we go on that holiday?
If it was me, I would be just like, let's get the house and go and record, but let's not party. Like, let's just have a good time and keep it nice and keep it chill. But like, once you say let's party, I feel like you're going, well, we're not doing work then. Yeah. Like, we're partying.
You just want the opportunity to get away with your mates.
Yeah. Yeah. And go and get away with your mates. But, you know, when it comes to like, you know, music requires, especially for producers anyway, it's fucking work, man. Like, you got to do a lot of you got to do a fair bit of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're just rocking up and, you know, plugging in and playing and whatnot, that can be awesome. But that also has its own work, which is like, you got to have written stuff and you got to prepare and you got to practice your instrument and all that stuff. But, you know, production's actually like, I got to sit here and edit your shit. I don't want to record 40 takes of you doing the same thing. I want you to do the thing really well, and I want to use that and capture magic, you know. I think that's the other thing about new gear and computers is we can get 40 takes. I can get 5 gigs of someone doing one song if I want, but it's rarely is it going to be essential.
Yep.
It's just someone throwing stuff at a wall.
Yep.
It's just someone going, oh, what's going to stick? And that's not songwriting. That's just, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a spiritual guy?
Yeah.
Yep. What is spirituality to you?
I would say it's a healthy conception of mine and everyone's death.
Yep.
It's the idea that this is a finite adventure and that there is a degree of responsibility that you need to have when you live life, and you know how to be generous and give back to life.
Yep.
I believe in a kind of I believe in an energy that is built to sustain things.
Yep.
And I believe that energy is, you know, something that you can choose to give yourself and your time to.
Yep.
Or you can work counter to that. You know, it's sort of a Taoist philosophy. It's like there is a flow, and that natural flow of moving things forward or in a natural space is very, you know when you're there, and you know when you're kind of going against it. And I guess I'm trying to go with it.
Yep.
I'm very inarticulate when it comes to my spirituality.
Yep.
But I do feel the vibe.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's your spirituality.
That's my thing.
Me, spirituality isn't, it's never religion. And that's where it can be misconstrued, I guess.
Yeah, I've got more time for religion now than I probably ever have, only because I've got new friends who are kind of a bit more religious. And you know, I think what happens is that people get a sense of community and belonging and kind of a pat on the back and everything's going to be okay kind of feeling from religion. And that is a valid thing which I get from music, or I get from a lot of other things. So I used to really, it was like, you know, that's a real mental trickery to sort of believe in this stuff of, you know, God or heaven or hell or these things seemed like forms of slavery in my mind.
Yeah.
But I don't have that same reaction anymore. I feel more like that's what
Yep.
that's what gets you through the night. That's what gets you through the night.
Yep.
But my own, and definitely, having Lua is also bringing this forward. My spirituality seems to become more and more practical every day, like more and more like a farmer or a gardener rather than, you know, a magician.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Last question before our final segment. If you were to create a foundation on what's important to you to give back to the world, what would it be?
If I was to create a foundation, like a charity or something,
Yeah, charity
to give back to the world,
like whatever you would feel important that would make the world a better place.
I would, if I was going to start a foundation, I would look at locally how we could bring people from a background of privilege to a closer understanding of the natural law or law of the indigenous culture of where they either live or of Australia in general. I've always thought that there would be there's a great opportunity to take people out of their comfort zones and introduce them to different ways and modes of thinking and living. And I think that we live in a country that has like one of the oldest culture in it. And again, Australia, so-called Australia's ability to kind of not engage with Aboriginal culture is mind-blowing to me when there's so much to learn and there's so much to kind of ask of advice. Like, how do we look after this place? How do we know this place the way that your culture has known this place? Because right now, we're getting it quite wrong. So maybe my foundation would be about trying to make that happen more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I mean, even like if you reflect on not even just like socioeconomics of Indigenous culture versus the so-called Australia, but you could even reflect on like bushfires. Like, they didn't burn down.
Land management.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Like,
and community management.
You could easily be educated on from practices that have been in practice for hundreds of thousands of years. Yeah, and 100%. Like, I feel like every year we have those bushfires, and it's just like I feel like there's an answer to how to make this work. Yeah. And, I think it's just no one's listening.
You're right. I think that there is, but I also think that the way that the Western world has adopted sort of like excessive growth capitalism, like just this unending desire to keep growing and growing. Everything's got to grow and get bigger, and it is unsustainable. It is cruel. It is. It's will be the death of us. Yeah. And I feel like
draining the Murray-Darling for, corporate greed and wondering why the farmers can't get a break. And it's just like, if you're draining the Murray-Darling but it's still a drought, like where's your long-term, where's the long-term thinking on this? And where's the sort of, the kind of ability to caretake. Land is not ours. We don't own land. It's not something I can drain and take all the resources from. It's like something that at best I can, subsist with or learn to kind of work with. And I think that, I just think that we were getting it really wrong at the moment. Yep. So, but what do I know? I live in Brunswick in the inner city. I'm trying my best to understand the very small locale that I'm in and know where I am and what the context is. I talk about hopefully bringing up my daughter with the context of knowing whose land and what the history of this place is and what its spiritual qualities are. Like what does it mean? And those things
she's so fascinating. When we go out in the morning, sometimes we'll sit out in the backyard, and when she hears a bird, she's just like this, and it's magical. Like it's truly wondrous watching her wonder at it. And part of it is like, there is, I don't want to just see the world in economic terms or in categories and this and this. There's something beautifully connected about all these things, and that's what I think we as a culture, and I mean collectively in almost the planet right now, is moving away from that concept of that connection of all things and the interrelationships, this meta understanding of how things relate, and into more and more compartmentalized ways of making money, or, So if I had a foundation, it was just like, it'd probably be taking people out into the desert, dropping acid and going, look at the stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd sign up. Yeah, 100%. All right. So the last question we do, sort of changing around with the new episodes, but put together 5 artists. I guess we could do Joelistics Music Festival.
Yeah.
5 artists, past or present, that would join you on the ultimate gig bill.
Ooh, God, that's
and all of this goes into a Spotify playlist for all the guests, and it's just the most eclectic, magical playlist.
Wow.
ever.
Oh, man, I love it. Okay, so since we've been talking about production, I'll choose some producers. Or probably King Tubby would be on there. I would say Nina Simone is on there. She's on the gig. I would say, who else would I say is on there? Al Green is singing.
Yep.
Maybe
it's great. It's like breaking up. Like, I've interviewed a lot of metal. Just like people who are just like, yeah, fucking, you like metal stuff, so I'll say metal stuff. I'm like, oh, you're just kidding me. This is sick. You're adding some fucking culture to the playlist. This is great.
Oh man, let's go even deeper. Like I'd put Sun Ra. Sun Ra is playing.
Yeah,
he's just come in and he's like, I love he's going to enter into the playlist amongst all the metal artists as well. Sun Ra and the orchestra.
Yeah,
and maybe Paul Simon.
Sick.
Yeah. Who I am, I'm a tragic Paul Simon fan.
Yeah.
I fucking love Paul Simon.
So what do we got? We got, just going through the playlist so far, we got like stuff from The Cure, The Soundgarden.
Oh, yeah.
John Butler Trio, Silverchair, Dom Dollar, Ohio Players, all sorts of stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it.
Weird as fuck. All right, Joel.
Love it.
That'll do us, mate.
Great,
Thanks
man.
so much.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Sweet as, how good. If I could get everyone to please go visit the new website I've just built. Pretty cool. It's not fun making websites for the first time, but I think it's all coming together. There you can go and check out some of the services that My Normal is now offering. As you would have heard in the advertisements, you can have your own podcast and you can be a cool person just like me. With a little bit of help from My Normal, you can be very, very cool. Very cool. I promise. You'll be cool. Podcasts are really cool. So please visit www.mynormalpodcasts.com for all your podcast needs. Cool. So I've mentioned how cool you're going to be if you do that. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Let's get this thing fucking jumping, yeah? Let's do it. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to take a couple of weeks off because this young man's getting married. It's been a fuck around. Cheers, COVID. As I post this in a couple of weeks, having a ceremony, and then I'm going to go sail the Whitsundays with my honey mama. So when I get back, in August. I hope to be really just kicking goals with this. It's going to be some fun times. Got some great guests locked in already, and I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Thank you so much for listening so far, and if you have not turned this podcast off yet, you are my favourite listener, not everyone else, you. Have a bloody beautiful day. I love you, maybe? I don't know. I'm going to stop talking. Be a good person. See you soon.